Comic books are an incredibly versatile medium, balancing a wide variety of stories and genres, whether they're serious, ridiculous, or somewhere in between with ease. And while other mediums have that same ability within them, comics are almost custom built to mine the more out there premises to their fullest. Whether we're talking about Fantastic Four over at Marvel, Jack Kirby with the New Gods, or a vast portion of Joe Casey's comics library, amongst so many others. These properties would require hundreds of millions of dollars to bring to life over at a film studio or at a video game publisher. While the comics industry only requires a writer, penciler, inker, colorist, and letterer at most to accomplish the same concept, enabling the creative team to have a greater sense of freedom to tell their story their way. Case in point, Namwolf from Albatross Funny Books, a comic that's a vibrant mashup of the Vietnam War and werewolves. 18-year-old Marty Spencer is drafted into the Vietnam War, only to discover that he is the latest in a long line of werewolves in his family's bloodline, and utilizes his birthright to help his platoon in combating the Viet Cong and the monsters at their disposal. Namwolf is a concept that never occurred to me, but the moment I heard about it, I knew it was something I wanted to read. Monster stories have always had a special place in my heart, and something about placing a werewolf into America's most controversial war, where American soldiers were not as widely respected by the public as they were in previous wars, just feels right. I'm honestly surprised it's taken so long for this mashup to occur. Half the battle when it comes to making comics is standing out from the pack, and with a premise like Namwolf, that's an easy head-turner for sure. Upon opening the trade, I immediately got the sense that I was reading an old-school comic from the 70s or 80s in all the right ways. The pacing of the story is compressed like many stories were from that era, flying through pages at a breakneck pace, with an emphasis on thrilling action sequences and leaving plenty of room for the art to shine. When Marty turns into a Namwolf, we're treated to some gruesome transformation sequences, followed shortly by buckets of blood from any poor soldier that crosses his path. And later on, we're treated to fights with some crazy bat creatures and sequences of the Namwolf mowing down enemy soldiers with an M16. Writer Fabian Rangel Jr., to his credit, does a commendable job of adding a pulpy monster spin onto a setting that is typically used to explore some darker war themes. Even though the book still goes about exploring many of those same story beats, it's just not done quite the same way due to the title character. Another welcome addition is with the third-person narration, a style that has mostly died out since the late 90s and early 2000s, but can be an effective method of adding extra details to a scene that could be difficult for the art to convey on its own, particularly when describing background elements like the heat something gives off, for instance. The major issue with the style back in its day was the tendency for a writer to over-narrate the captions to where it could derail the momentum of the art, but it's balanced well in the story and matches the old-school art style and feel of the book. I found myself going through these issues like candy in one quick burst after another thanks to not only its pacing, but the tantalizing cliffhangers left at the end. The book pretty much had me once I saw the reveal that the Viet Cong had monsters of their own at the end of the first issue. Normally I take a slight break between issues to digest what happened, but how can you expect me to stop reading after that? Concepts like Namwolf often live and die based on the artwork, and fortunately artist Logan Fairbairn brought his A-game to the book, with art that is wonderfully expressive and violent, with a clarity to his pages that lends itself for a seamless reading experience. His best pages are, of course, whenever Namwolf is featured front and center, but especially when it comes to the monster fights. There's always something cathartic in watching monsters tear each other to shreds. That's probably my inner horror fan talking, but I'd venture a guess that Fairbairn had a blast with those pages for a similar, if not the same reason. Plus, in one of those issues, we're treated to some flashbacks of werewolves in various wars throughout history, which was a nice treat for anyone looking for some more werewolf action, and I'm really hoping we get one of those settings as a prequel someday. When it comes to the book's colors, Brendan Wagner did a bang-up job as well, being one of the major contributors to his book feeling like an old-school comic with his vibrant color palette, though he's also able to mix his style up when it comes to flashback scenes or nighttime sequences where the pages have a darker style to them. But no matter the setting, his reds and greens always pop out from the page and grab my attention. While entertaining throughout, there were some aspects of Namwolf that didn't entirely click with me, most of which can be traced back to the book's pacing. The book covers a lot of ground in 4 issues, exploring Marty's time in the Vietnam War, fighting the Viet Cong's monsters, and his disillusion in the greater conflict. Unfortunately, there isn't much of an emotional core for me to invest myself in Marty's journey. This is especially apparent with Marty's squad mates, some of which I can say I enjoyed, but there were hardly any quiet moments for me to invest myself in the camaraderie of the unit, or any of the hostility a particular character has towards the Namwolf. The latter of which boils over into a confrontation in the second half, that while it is something that was seeded through, the conflict ultimately lacked the impact it could have if the dynamic had more time to develop. Certain circumstances separate Marty from the squad shortly after his transformation, which while I understand the plot reasons behind it, that choice winds up forcing those characters into the back burner for an issue, which is unfortunately a quarter of the trade. There's also a bizarre power that Namwolf uses during the final issue that stretches the believability of this premise for me. Yes, that is still even possible for a comic called Namwolf. It's not a deal breaker when it comes to the book, but more of a, well, that's a bit odd kind of moment that took some time for me to recover from. Back to the subject of pacing. Namwolf is a series that feels like it needed at least one more issue, if not another story arc to fit in all its character progression and plot points. Though I do understand the reality when it comes to publishing a comic book when you're not Marvel, DC, or a high-profile Image book. These books are more often than not made for the passion of it, with a very high chance of the series making a small profit, if any profit at all. Comics are just as much a business as they are an art form after all, and unfortunately it's not uncommon for a story to be condensed down due to page restrictions. I still stand by my criticism, however, since you need to make the best use of the space you have, but that's always another element people should consider with comics, especially when it comes to the smaller publishers. The one thing that does confuse me about this series, though, is the fact that there's a one print on the spine of the trade paperback, which usually implies there'll be another story or stories down the road, yet issue 4 seemed to wrap things up with a pretty set ending. Perhaps it was intended to be an ongoing, but for one reason or another plans changed. Or there are plans for more down the road, but I'm not sure. I tried to reach out to the publisher for clarification, but unfortunately as of this recording, I haven't received a response as of yet. This problem unfortunately compounds into the price as well. Sure, the book is printed on some great paper which really helps the art to stand out and look good on the shelf, but unfortunately $17.99 for 4 issues of content along with back matter is a bit of a tough sell for people on a budget. It would help if the issues were perhaps oversized, but the average issue clocks in around 22 pages. A bit more than the average Marvel and DC comic, mind you, but not too drastic of a difference. Independent comics unfortunately have a disadvantage in this regard, where lower print runs naturally lead to higher book prices, and they do have my sympathies in that regard. However, I can't factor in their side alone with my rating, but what I feel is the best value for readers out there. And while I enjoyed Namwolf for its old school flavor, bombastic action, and engrossing artwork, the compressed nature of its story and the high price point is a bit too much for me to recommend this at full price. What I will suggest is to pick this up at a slight discount if you can around the $15 mark, especially if you're looking for a different kind of werewolf story, then check it out.